My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RECO12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm living in the relative happy, joyous, and free life that is promised to those living in recovery, and have been very active in the rooms of recovery since September of 2013. Welcome to the 112th meeting of RECO12. RECO12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented many fellowships and identify with addictions with such variety as alcoholism, drugs, food, sex, gambling, theft, codependency, and all of the anon groups. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of that speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you're hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to www.reco12.com. That's RECO12.com to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. RECO12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions, and I'll put the link in the chat of the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast if you would like to contribute. We look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers from their higher power. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'll introduce today's guest speaker, Father Bill W., whose chosen topic is Carl Jung and the recovery journey, and I'm really excited. He's one of my recovery mentors and has helped me a lot. So here's a little bit about him. Father Bill W. is a recovered alcoholic with nearly 50 years in recovery and an Episcopal priest in Austin, Texas, who has worked in the addiction treatment field for over 45 years. Bill presents workshops and hosts the Father Bill W. podcast, and speaks frequently on AA's spiritual history and two-way prayer. Take it away, Father Bill. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Justin. It's good to be with you and good to be back here once again. And I appreciate the opportunity to go a little bit off usual topic. You know, when we were discussing what did I want to speak about, we usually tell our stories, and part of, the problem with getting almost 50 years sober is your story gets awfully damn long. So you can only get to certain parts of it. And there's a part that often gets left out. And Justin said it would be okay if we kind of took a deeper dive into that. And that's the subject of Carl Jung and his influence. And in keeping kind of with the set of this program, or this podcast rather, I'm going to intertwine my own story with it in terms of how he influenced me, as well as how he influenced the whole 12-step movement. So most of us first probably came upon Carl Jung when we were introduced to the Big Book. His influence is felt there in a number of different ways. But primarily in the story of Roland Hazard. And I'm guessing most of you know that story, but just to quickly review it, he's the businessman who's told in the early chapters of the book. He's got an alcohol problem, been to treatment with some of the best in the country, can't get sober, goes over and studies under Jung, and Jung's name is mentioned in the Big Book. So he places himself under his care, thinks he's got it, like alcoholics are prone to do. He's got it, and he leaves treatment with Jung, and fairly soon he relapses. He goes back for a second visit, and Jung does something for which we should be forever grateful. He refuses to take him on as a patient for a second time. And this is where he says something, and the story's recounted in the book, in the Big Book. I'm going to read it. And when Jung was presented with this version, he said, yeah, that's pretty accurate, what Roland reported to you. So here's the statement from the big book. Jung said to him, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never seen one single case recovered where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Roland was, I guess, what we would call today a real alcoholic, and Roland is devastated because he's looking to him to take him back and, kind of fine tune around the edges or something. And Jung says, no, I can't take you back. Roland says, are there no exceptions to this? I mean, does anybody get well? Jung responds, yes. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces in the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Jung's best advice, and this was significant as well, to Roland was basically go place yourself in a religious environment and hope some change like this happens to you. And this is part of our founding story, that he was basically, Roland was sent on a spiritual journey to experience a psychic change. And if you look at steps 1 and steps 12, that's what we're talking about. Roland's at 1, and Jung is telling him, get yourself to 12. There were no steps. There was none of that stuff. But that's the direction. That's the hero's journey that Roland is being sent on. And I think that's the journey that I went on, am still on, and that every addict who's seeking recovery, real recovery, deep recovery, is going to be on a spiritual journey just like that. The transformations that were spoken about in that quote from the big book. Now, a couple of questions here. Did Jung specifically send Roland to the Oxford group? We're not sure of that. This was in the early 1930s. The Oxford group was going there. It's highly likely that he was aware of it and likely that he suggested it. Not sure exactly, though. But that's what Roland does. He comes back to the States, gets involved with the Oxford group, helps Ebby Thatcher, and then Ebby Thatcher goes and helps Bill Wilson. And that's the chain of events that kind of closes that circle of how Jung, first of all, got involved with the beginnings of the program. I got a couple of quotes here from Jung that I'd like to explore a little bit. I think you'll find them interesting. The first is Jung wrote later, among all my patients in the second half of life, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill because of having lost that which the living religions of every age have given to their followers. And none of them has been really healed who did not regain a religious outlook. Couple of comments on that. One, for those of us who've been in the rooms, a lot of people come in with very negative experiences of religion. A lot of us have been burned in churches and things, and there is a very sharp decline been going on for the last 85 years or so. The Big Book came out almost with 1939. I mean, over those years, there's been a decline, a further decline in religious involvement. So you got to be careful. I had to be careful. What is he talking about here? Is he saying go back to church? Well, not necessarily. He's saying go back to what churches historically had been able to give, but are having a really hard time giving now. That's kind of the message that Jung himself was expounding. He also says there that a crisis comes in your life. He calls it the midlife crisis. That among his patients, second half of life, the rules change. Where in the first part of life, you're building up an ego, become a self, become, attaboy, you didn't poop in your pants, attaboy, you go to school, they give you a star when you spell something right, attagirl, way to go. Lots and lots of strokes, and those strokes are really helpful. Those strokes allow us to build up an ego, a sense of self, a sense of who we are, But then, midlife, and I think in the case of addicts, when we come into recovery, a whole different set of rules now apply. It's not keep building up your ego in most cases. It's in most cases, you built your ego up a little bit too much. And that ego has to start coming down. It has to start getting right-sized. Sometimes I hear in 12-step world, I have to get rid of my ego. And I'm always quick to say, if you do that, you're going to become psychotic. You need an ego. You need a sense of self. But we need a healthy sense of self. And so that's the process. That's the spiritual journey, a huge part of the spiritual journey that we are on. Second quote. This one's going to go a little bit deeper. You may not have heard this one before. And this is kind of addressed to people who have a strong religious connection in their life. And this is very interesting to see how Jung regarded them in his practice. He says, my attitude to these matters is that as long as a patient is really, underline really a member of a church, he ought to be serious. He ought to really and sincerely be a member of that church. And he should not go to a doctor to get his conflicts settled when he believes that he should do it with God. For instance, when a member of the Oxford group comes to me in order to get treatment, I say, you are a member of the Oxford group. So long as you are there, you settle your affair with the Oxford group. I can't do it better than Jesus. I like that. I like Jung's humility, to say, hey, there are two ways to come at this thing. There's get really spiritual and really serious about your religions. And the truth is, most of us don't anyway. I mean, most of us, that chapter that says we agnostics, that's written to all of us. It's not to just those people out there. It's to every one of us who at some level is agnostic. We give you God, we give you this part of our life, but the other parts, we're holding these close to our vests, But if you are seriously religious, And Jung said many people that he worked with did find recovery in religion. I think the Big Book says that as well. But I think most of us know it's not that many. It's not that many. And so we need some fine tuning for sure. And then perhaps to go back to the church we belonged in, or find a different church, or find the things that religion does have to offer that can be helpful. We use the term spirituality now, but there's a long, long tradition of the various faith traditions that I've seen a lot of people, in my case, that's exactly what happened. I mean, I kind of did the AA God thing for 20 years until it didn't work enough for me anymore. And then I had to go and dig deeper. And that's where Jung really came into my life and opened some doors for me that I had thought had been closed. And here's the final quote from Jung that I wanted to share with you today. And it's about himself and where he stands in this division. That's not probably the right word. A difference between the religious route and the scientific route. Now, Jung was a scientist, but he was really different than Freud. Freud saw religion as a reversion to childhood. He basically dismissed it. Jung did not. Jung took the spiritual side of man really sincerely. The psyche, the soul. He believed in it, and said that's where the work has to be done. That's where the changes really need to occur. And so here's his thing, a statement of his. And I've probably read this thing 50 times. I just love it because it gives hope to the hopeless. And I'm always a big fan of, and count myself among those often. He says this: I'm not addressing myself to the happy possessors of faith, but to those many people for whom the light has gone out. The mystery has faded and God is dead. Who? That's actually a quote from Nietzsche. And he studied Nietzsche quite a bit. And there's a misinterpretation about Nietzsche. Nietzsche wasn't saying, hey, God is dead as a pronouncement. He's saying human beings, particularly Western Europe, in its relationship to the God image, for all practical purposes, God is dead. There's no connecting link, There's no conscious contact. There's no realized relationship. You follow me? And that's how God is dead. And what Nietzsche said is, and oh my God, are we in for some trouble? So, but isn't that where most of us are? I mean, when religion has taken a terrible dive, and religion has done a terrible job. Let me say that as well. It's done a terrible job of giving people the connection that they're starving for. And that's one of the things we find, I think, in 12-step recoveries. We find people who are serious about this thing, working this thing. And that's what I found. I was studying to be a Jesuit priest at the time, and I found more spirituality in the basement of the church than I did upstairs in the church. Something was going on down there. What was it? Well, I think it was really going inside, going deeper into ourselves. It wasn't so much doctrines and dogmas and belief systems as it was living systems, ways to live. I didn't know how to live. I could do the doctrines and dogmas pretty good, but I was living in my head. I wasn't living in my gut. And that's what the big book says. The great reality is within. And Jung, for me, certainly in the beginning, to a limited extent, opened the door to that reality. And then when I hit 20 years and I know I needed to go deeper, he once again kind of came to the fore and opened more of those doors for me in ways that allowed me to go deeper. So I'm going to start over again on this one because it's an important one, and I got off on a tangent as I'm prone to do. Not addressing myself to the happy possessors of faith, but to those many people for whom the light has gone out. The mystery has faded. So he's inviting us to a mystery, and God is dead. For most of them, there is no going back. And one does not know either whether going back is the better way. See, I don't know that going back, if you've been in a dead church, going back to a dead church is not going to be the answer to what you need. What you need is a living connection with the mystery, capital M. And that's where he's sending us. To gain an understanding of religious matters probably is all that is left us today is the psychological approach. Not a theological approach, not understanding God, but a psychological approach, an experience in the psyche, in the soul, of a transformation, of a changed relationship. And this is why I take these thought forms that have become historically fixed. So he's going to take the Christian story, the Judeo-Christian story, because he pays a lot of attention to the Jewish scripture as well. I take these thought forms, he calls them, these images of God that have been passed on for thousands of years, all right? I take these thought forms that have become historically fixed, try to melt them down again, get down to the essence, melt them down, and pour them into molds of immediate experience. Oh, that's what I mean. When I read that, it was like, oh my God, what a wealth of information. And I had to go back. I studied that thing, like I said, about 100 times I've read it. And it always intrigues me, because this is what Jung is trying to do. It's what he was trying to do with Roland, you know? He was trying to say, Roland, I can't help you. But look, take the religious tradition seriously, you know? And get into it deeply. And as a result of that, you can affect a change inside of you. You can get to what we would call that 12th step. Having done all of these things that do what? That remove the blockages. Say half the steps are there to remove the blockages to God. You know, it's not to go find God. Just remove the stuff that's in the way of that experience, and you have it. You know. Again, just to kind of sum up on this part, you know, what he's saying there is, if you have a solid religious connection, get serious about it, go deeply into it. If you don't, then look at the stories and the myths of the great religions that they all leave us. All right, but look at them again. Look at them with different eyes. You know, not literally, not taking them literally. See, that was my problem. You know, I tried very hard to be a traditional Christian, and I failed. I'm sorry. This is my story. This is, you know, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I failed at that. You know, if I have to take so many of the things that religious people are telling me, you must believe this, you must believe that. Well, I'm sorry, but I didn't. Actually, I'm not so sorry anymore, I just had the courage to say, I don't. Now, where does that leave me? And I think this is where Jung really helped me, because he said, he taught me about myth, the myth. And myth is not make believe. Myth is not unreal. Myth is more than real. It's more than real. And what Jung did is he studied the great myths that come to us, and that's what our religions pass on to us. And in the Christian myth, there is death followed by life. And you got to die. If you want to find the life that's being talked about, you got to die. But it's not the kind of death that comes at the end of life. It's the kind of death that comes in the first step. It's the kind of death that comes when you say, my life is unmanageable. I can't manage it. God, I don't know who you are, but I need you to manage it for me. Boom. That opens up access, and it did for me, to that something inside that was confusing. I mean, I didn't understand it, but here's where the history again comes in to be helpful. It isn't God as we understand God. It's entering the mystery of God. We don't understand God, but we understand ourselves, and we understand our egos, and I understand what my ego can do to me and to others around me when it takes on God-like characteristics. You know what I mean? So that God ain't God, I'm God. And there's an inflation that happens. And this is what Jung is taking quite seriously. Watch yourself. I mean, if Jung were really into the steps, he'd say, step 10, I like that step there. I really like that step. Continue to take personal inventory. Continue to keep your eyes on that ego. Is it getting too big? Or is it getting too small? Because if it's too small, it's really too big in disguise. You know, I'm nothing. I'm worthless. I'm a piece of dirt. Well, that's egotistical, Jung would say. That's just a flip side of ego slipping in and taking us away. Okay, I want to kind of close with this, that, and I started off with it, that we're on the hero's journey, and I really believe this. That every alcoholic and addict who really starts off, and this is where the myths come in. So you better know what myth you're following. And one of the ancient myths that you see in so many of the different both religions and cultures is the myth of the hero's journey, where the young person goes out and has an encounter, and as a result of that is changed. 4 stages to that. This might be helpful to someone out there, I hope. The first stage of the journey is an encounter between the ego, Jung said, and the greater personality. I mean, he would take seriously that the great reality is within. And Jung would say, we are at least 2. We are our little selves and our greater selves. And I think what I got introduced to when I started doing two-way prayer was I got in touch with the greater self. I mean, people ask me, is this God or is this yourself talking when you do your two-way prayer? I said, I don't know. But if it's me, it's the best part of me I've ever found. And that's the God part. And that God part is in each and every one of us. And that God part wants to speak to us. So we have an encounter. We have an encounter with that presence. As a result of that, we experience this, the second part, a wound or a suffering. Robert Johnson, I find Robert Johnson really helpful. Jung is hard to read, all right? I've finally gotten to him, but it's 30 years later. I'm reading them now. But Robert Johnson opened the door to the Jungian world for me, the inner world. And he's talked about a wound. He has an expression, the ego is boiling in the oil of transformation. I love that phrase. And that's if you think, you get sober or you quit drugs or whatever the hell it is, and you think it's going to be clear, easy sailing, good luck. Pain awaits. Richard Rohr, who's done a lot of Jungian stuff, I know that from his work and discussions with him. He says there's two things powerful enough to change a person: prayer and pain. Most people choose pain. All right. So in this adjustment, which goes on, expect to have pain, a wounding. All right. But there's an endurance. This is number 3. The perseverance of the ego, which endures the experience and tries to find meaning, meaning, meaning within it. Okay. I knew 2 things when I got sober almost 50 years ago: don't drink and don't run. And I was big on both. And don't run was just as important as don't drink. To stay and allow it to happen, to endure the pain, you see? All right? And if you persevere, then you get number 4, a divine revelation by which the ego is rewarded with some insight into the transpersonal psyche, a death of the old self, a rebirth of the new. And this is a cycle that goes on over and over and over again. No pain, no gain. I can pray my way into it, or I can suffer until I'm ready to say, okay, I'm ready to let go of that one too. So for me, Jung was there at the beginning. He's there at the end for me. And I think he can play a really important role in the lives of many alcoholics. Wilson thanked him for his contributions 20 years into his own recovery with the critical role that he played in development of AA. So hope some of this was helpful. I'm going to pay attention to it. So my ego needs to. So thank you, Justin. Good to be with you guys, and have at me.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Father Bill. Loved that. And that the hero's journey is something that I am really enthralled by and interested in. And I love how you laid it out that way through that process, and several other points that were just amazing. So we have several questions that came in. Before we get to those, if there's any other questions that you have for Father Bill, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. Looks like 2 speech bubbles over the top of each other. We'll get to as many of those as we can. I will save those questions and post them on our Facebook page. And I've put the link, and I will put the link again for the Facebook page where you can join in and answer questions and ask questions, and we can be in this community of doing this. So a couple questions here, Father Bill. First one that came in is from Robert, and Robert asks, thank you for sharing your insight. What is the thirst that gets people past the religiousness and into the relationship?
What is the thirst? Well, it's the thirst for God. I mean, when Jung responded to Wilson's letter in 1960, he talked about that thirst. He said, alcoholism is a thirst for wholeness. W-H-O-L-E. It's not a thirst for holiness. It's a thirst for completeness, wholeness. And that's what the religions are there to help us on that journey. Now, I don't think they're doing a very good job of it, but that's what they're intended to do. And what Jung is also saying is don't throw them out. My God, if we throw them out, there's chaos. But let's revisit them. And one of the things that really intrigued me right from the get-go, once I started learning about the Oxford Group, was that its original name was a first century Christian fellowship. And I'm here to tell you, as much as I went and studied Jung and Oxford group history, I also started studying first century Christianity. What was going on there? Who is this Jesus? And this is my story, who is this Jesus guy? And how did people respond to him? And in many ways, they were comparing him, from what I've learned of first century, to Caesar, because Caesar had declared himself God, and Jesus is living and all the Jews were living under domination by the Romans, and what they're saying is, no, God's found in powerlessness. God's not found in power. He's not found in empires that crush people. He's found in poverty, and he's found in weakness, and he's found in that naked guy there on the cross. Well, quite a challenge. And many of us tried to hold on to our old ideas. And that's where the ego suffers. So, I mean, to me, answer your question, it's for wholeness, the search for wholeness. And we took false gods. Alcohol to me was a false god. Sex is a false god to some. Workaholic. It's a substitute for the real. And at some part of your soul, you're going to know, this ain't doing it. I want more. I want what's real. Listen to that.
Stress and trauma happen inside of the body, which means we can heal them through the body. My name is Luis Mojica. I'm a somatic therapist, nutritionist, and host of the Holistic Life Navigation podcast. Join me each week as I teach you how to release stress and trauma through listening to your body, using nutrition, somatic experiencing, and other holistic practices. You can listen at the Holistic Life Navigation podcast or at holisticlifenavigation.com.
Yeah, thank you for digging in there. I really appreciate that. And you mentioned the phrase a couple times in this talk that churches just aren't doing as well as they could be doing in providing that wholeness and that connection, that deeper meaning. What is one or two of the top things that you see that churches could or should be doing better to invite people into that journey, that hero's journey, or into that connection?
You can't take people on a journey you haven't traveled yourself. I was with a group of priests many years ago in Israel. We went on a tour, actually a study thing for 3 weeks. AA buddy and myself, and mostly it was priests. And there was going to be a night of sharing. All right, they were going to share. And I said to this guy, Tom, I said, hey, Tom, before we went in, don't expect much sharing. He was an AA guy. Most people in the church don't know how to share. They don't know how to go deep. They don't know how to open themselves up and reveal themselves and their weaknesses to one another. Is the church a safe place where you can really talk about what's your own brokenness? For many churches, it's not. And then just to talk about your brokenness isn't the deal either, because there's many churches just doing that. They talk about their brokenness, but they don't change. So it's really about transformation. It's becoming the self that you were meant to be. That's the spiritual journey.
Thank you. I love that. And that quote, or that thing you said, can't take people on a journey that you haven't been on yourself. Powerful. I appreciate that. Okay. Several more questions have come in. First one will go to Lisa. How can we use two-way prayer to remove the blockages to go deeper than just using a 10th step process?
Well, you can use what you do in a two-way prayer session. All right. To me, it's the culmination of 10, 11, and 12. So what I'm doing in my two-way prayer first is I'm watching step 10, continue to take personal inventory, continue to watch. See what's going on inside. All right? Own it. Don't push it down. Own it. Bring it up to the surface. This is what Jung was all about. Don't push stuff down into the shadow, you see, because it's going to go down the basement there, and it's going to rumble around, and it's going to come out. So rather than that, say, what's going on down there? Who are you inside? And do some what Jung called shadow work. So the most important thing in the two-way prayer, I think, is the asking for help once you see what's going on. But don't ask for help if you don't need help. But there are lots of areas, if you'll look, you're going to need help. What are those areas of your life? Watch them. They come up. Your life's a laboratory. It's a laboratory. And every day, potential lessons are going to come up. Watch them. They're the perfect lessons for you. That jerk of a boss you have, perfect lesson. Not there accidentally, Jung would say, you attract one another, there he is. Now, what are you going to do with that? Synchronicity. I mean, that's his, things happen in God's world, which is a mystery, for a reason. But my job is to find meaning and purpose in that. Okay? Meaning and purpose. Viktor Frankl was extremely important to me in my first year of sobriety. A Jewish psychiatrist in the concentration camp. And the only way he survived, and I'm trying to survive in early recovery, okay? So I can relate to old Victor there, all right? And he was in a lot worse conditions than I. Find meaning and purpose here. Find meaning and purpose, because in the concentration camp, those who didn't find it gave up the ghost, gave up the spirit, gave up their lives. He could see it happening in them before. He would say, like, choose meaning and purpose over food, over water. It's the thing we can't live without. That connection with the living spirit of God. We call it God. We don't understand it. But we know when we're experiencing it, all right? Because it's fulfilling the deepest longings of my heart, all right? And when that happens, I'm in the presence. I'm not in the wilderness anymore. And see, how many stories from Scripture are all about that? Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden. Well, I mean, some people go searching for the garden. Well, good luck. Look to your own garden. Where'd you get kicked out? Where do you feel like you're out in the wilderness? That's what brings these stories to life, to your life. And that's where they have value, not to be worshipped as something from the past. And I get in trouble for this, but I'll say the same thing about the 12 steps. I mean, people are turning 12-step recovery into what the same mistake that we do with religion. We mechanize it. We make it mechanical. Meetings. It's not about meetings. It's about transformation. It's about change. It's about finding real meaning and purpose in your life and in my life. What is it that this power within me is pushing me, pulling me, encouraging me to do? What is it? What's the meaning and purpose of your life? You got to find it. You find that, and you're home free. Now, if a church can help you get there, great. And if they can't, start one.
A higher consumption of vegetables may cut your odds of developing depression by as much as 62%. An American Cancer Society study found that women who sit for more than 6 hours a day have a 40% higher death rate. Hi, My name is Maya Acosta, and I'm a health and wellness educator and host of the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast. Join me and the amazing people that I get to talk to as I set out to learn how to improve our quality of life and increase our longevity. You can listen at the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast or at healthylifestylesolutions.org.
Love it. I think that goes right into this next question. That's amazing. Thank you. This is from Sam. Sam says, I found that religion in itself could not help me get past, through, or over my addiction, as Jung seems to say.
No, Jung says for some that route works. Yes. But go ahead.
Okay, perfect. He says, I believe Sam can heal all maladies. Or not Sam. I believe Jesus can heal all maladies. Sam may believe. No.
Come on, Sam.
Awesome. And that's heavily taught in my religion, but that has been at odds with my experiences. And I've always needed therapy and 12-step groups in addition to my religious practice. Is Jung saying to just embrace our religious?
No. He's saying if you are into your religion and heavily into it, go, but work it. I remember a guy, and my father was a terrible alcoholic. I remember a guy coming to our house, and I'm about 7 or 8 years old. And he tells my father, he's a drinking buddy of my father. And he says, I'm going to Graymore in New York. And it was a kind of a Franciscan Abbey quasi-treatment center for Catholic addicts. You understand? Where they took the religious thing quite seriously. The Matt Talbot groups in the Catholic tradition take that religion and the alcoholism very seriously. In Ireland, there's the pledge, and among Native American cultures, there's groups that get together and support one another. They take their religion seriously. Get into that sweat lodge and let's really do this thing. What Jung is saying is, if that is your path, then embrace your path and go that route. But for many modern people, the modern mind, that path is difficult. And I think for the reasons, Justin, that we've been discussing, that the churches are not doing a good job. They're not, I ask people, have you ever been in a dead church? I said, yeah. And then I asked them, have you ever been in a dead AA meeting? Yeah. So that's what we're talking about. Where's life and where's death? Find life. And it sounded like Sam may have found a balance. And that's nice. That's really good. I've kind of find a balance too. I go to my 12-step thing for one set of experiences. I go to church for a different set of experiences. And I don't expect, for me, church to give me the one that the other gives. And I don't expect the other to give what the second one gives. I'm trying to get a balance. And I don't think the churches do a very good job with addiction. And I don't think 12-step groups generally do a very good job of handling religious questions. It's like, well, get your own God and throw away 5,000 years of human experience, and let's see how you do. It's kind of crazy, rather than, and this is what Jung is saying, I think. Dig in, but go behind it. Don't be a literalist. That leads nowhere. It leads to rigidity. And you can get rigidity in the churches, and God knows that they're full of them. And you can get rigidity in 12-step groups. And I think God knows there's a lot of that going on out there too, rather than life.
Yeah, thank you. And you introduced me to a piece of art. I can't remember who did it, but it's the general concept is a guy peeking out through under the universe, getting under it and looking out and seeing that there's so much more. Tell us a little bit about that piece of art and how that might apply.
Well, I want to find that little piece of art. It was a guy by the name of Leo in Moscow who had that as his Zoom picture image on his Gmail, and so it showed up on Zoom. But it was a young guy kneeling down, and there's a curtain, and he's picking up the curtain and peering into it. All right, and that was it. And it's a beautiful example of you're living in the third dimension, and the big book is talking about what? The fourth dimension of existence. And it's an invitation for us to move from three-dimensional reality into four-dimensional reality. You know, where the great reality is present. You see, and it's being experienced, not up here in the heart, in the gut. You see, when you're talking about what's behind that veil, you can't describe it. It's ineffable. I mean, every mystic will tell you that. Yeah, I can't put it into words, but I can invite you to the experience. You know?
Yeah, so I will try and find that piece of artwork, because that's
good. Well, send it to me.
That's where I saw it too. I'll send it to you. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll write to Leo, see if he wants to share.
Yeah, very good.
Those Russians aren't very happy with us right now, but I think Leo's a good guy.
Yeah, awesome. Another question here from Dee Dee. This is a quick one here. What are your recommendations on books to refer to about, some Jungian works, some of the simple things to get started, and about the story of Roland Hazard?
Oh dear, it's not a good biography of Roland out yet. Well, there may be, since I'm not really doing deep research. I try to find one, I can't find one. Had a friend who was working on it, but I don't think anything came of it. Roland doesn't. The family has not been very cooperative in terms of giving out history. Roland may have relapsed. He was a part of the Episcopal Church in New York City, where Sam Shoemaker was. There is a window donated by him in the church. You can go and see that. It's Calvary Church in New York. I think it's on Madison Avenue in the 20s. But there's not a lot about Roland. And in the long run, Roland isn't that important. There's a lot of historians who are saying, well, did Roland really go and be under the care of Jung? And if so, for how long? And they're checking the dates and the times and did he book passage here and all that. I don't care. See, this is where the myth is more important than the man. I don't care if Roland Hazard, well, we know he existed, but I don't care if the story's true or not. His story is my story. That's what's important. And his story is perhaps your story. Are you an addict who couldn't get it and who looked to science to give you the answer, and science couldn't give you the answer you needed? You couldn't find a doctor. I had a therapist many years ago. He had an expression, he used it on everybody, but it saved a lot of it for me. He said, Bill, you're clinically impossible. You're clinically impossible. Now, that's Roland's story. And I don't give a damn about Roland. I give a damn about Bill. Is Bill clinically impossible? Is reading another book about psychology going to really transform me? I don't think so. I think what's going to transform me is the shrinking of my ego down to its right size and being in right relationship with a God that I don't understand and the people who are around me, that I'm showing love and compassion, for them. That's it. That's the journey.
Thank you so much. We have a few more questions, but we're going to be out of time here. I will take these questions and post them in the Facebook page. I put the link to the Facebook page where you can request to join in there. I'll also send them off to Father Bill if he's able or wants to. He can answer them and I can email them back. You can email me at RECO12, P-O-D, RECO12pod@gmail.com, and I can do that. But Father Bill, before we close up, do you have any final words of wisdom before we get to the closing readings and prayer?
I didn't answer the second part of the question, which was how do you get started on the Jungian stuff? The answer for me would be Robert Johnson introduced me to that world in language that I could understand. Transformation was one of his books. He, for masculine psychology, was a second book. Shadow was a third book. And he basically takes Jungian concepts and breaks them down very simply. Inner gold. I did a podcast series on inner gold. Another one of Johnson's books. And so he's a great place to start. After you get through with him, and Inner Work is his kind of textbook. They're all small, but Inner Work is a great introduction in a general manner to this process. And then I would say move on to, well, the one who taught me so much is Edward Edinger. He's a little bit difficult, but I got a hold of his book called Ego and Archetype. And I got a hold of that book in the early 90s. And I probably read it 5 or 6 times since then. I go back to it. It's rich, it's deep. He's got some stuff on YouTube. Edinger was a Jungian analyst. He's dead, as is Johnson, as will I soon be. So there's a little ego reduction, very, very helpful. But they're good teachers. They're good teachers. So now I'm sorry. Now where are we going?
Excellent. Final words of wisdom before we close out.
I don't have any. Go. I'm fresh out of wisdom. I really feel like I've kind of overstepped my boundaries in terms of this, and that's why I wanted to do this. That this isn't a subject that you can usually get into in a 12-step thing because it's borderline academic and that sort of stuff. And somebody's going to say, well, keep it simple, you know. Well, if I could keep it simple, I would, but I can't. I can't keep it that simple. And so a simple program for complex people is where I think Jung can be, or was in my case, very helpful. That he took very complex ideas, because the inner world is it's vast. I mean, you're getting those things from space, you know, the new telescope thing that's showing my God. Well, just as deep inside. Absolutely convinced of that.
Awesome. I love that. As deep in as it is out there.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Father Bill. That was a great RECO12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your questions, or if you have other questions, please go to RECO12.com or the Facebook page and join in the community there. Ask and answer questions there. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way for us to work our 12th step and sharing this message with others. And next week, we'll be hearing from another of my favorite people with RECO12 and in recovery, Nikki M., whose topic will be spiritual principles in action. And she is a firecracker. Be ready. I look forward to speaking with another of my favorites, and she is another big influence in my own recovery walk. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the prayer for addiction. I can't remember what it's called, Father Bill. The prayer that you have here for us from the Book of Common Prayer that you'll lead us in.
Yeah. And it's for addicts. It's the prayer for addicts in the Episcopal list of prayers. Let us pray. O blessed Lord, you ministered to all who came to you. Look with compassion on all of us who through addiction have lost our health or freedom. Restore to us the assurance of your unending love and unfailing mercy. Remove from us the fears that beset us. Strengthen us in the work of our recovery, and to those who care for us, give patient understanding and persevering love. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Everybody come trudge this happy road with me. Work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing